Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest, and I'm also in long-term recovery from alcoholism and a number of other things. The purpose of these podcasts is basically to drill down a little deeper into the history of AA, the psychology behind it, the spirituality that supports it, and kind of intended for those who want something more than just slogans and meetings and that kind of thing. So if you're that kind of person, we welcome you. And if you're not, become that kind of person. We all start off where we are. I encourage you to visit our website. It's titled Two-Way Prayer. And while you are there, please sign up for the newsletter and learn about that very unique form of prayer and meditation that was practiced in the Pioneer program and somehow got lost along the way. Also want to thank our donors who keep the lights on here. Couldn't do this work without them. And remind you that the podcasts are now on YouTube. The channel is called Two-Way Prayer. So if that's more convenient for you, they tend to go up about 2 or 3 days after the podcasts do, but they should be there. So pay that a visit. Our present series is titled Eckhart Tolle and the Power of Now. Some people say Tolle. I looked it up and it's supposed to be tall, but I don't know. So it's Eckhart T to us. We'll get Eckhart in the program and make it easier on all of us. And my guest to guide us on the inner journey is Dr. Bruce P. Dr. Bruce is a clinical psychologist, couples therapist, and a mindfulness teacher living out in Southern California. He got his PhD from Duquesne, teaches in the Department of Religion and Spirituality at Loyola Marymount University. Dr. Bruce focuses on contemporary spiritual writers that include Eckhart Tolle. I've listed his contact information in the show notes, so if you want to send him a note, please feel free to do so. So welcome back, Dr. Bruce. It's been really informative and helpful to have you doing this series. So
yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thank you, Father Bill.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and many of our listeners have responded as well. So you're striking a note, and I should mention that you're also active for many years in adult children of alcoholics, and since the subject of this episode is relationships, I thought you might begin by telling us how ACA was helpful to you. All right, what is it that you got from that maybe straight psychology isn't going to give you?
When I went into ACA, they have a laundry list of ACA traits. And I just saw that so many of those traits were things that I experienced that were kind of key features of my personality. So that was helpful. But then the most helpful thing was once I understood that these habits, low self-esteem, people-pleasing, fear of authority figures, harsh, terrible inner critical voice, an egoic need to be greater than I was, approval seeking, then I began to see them in my experience. And so with the 12 steps helped me, especially with the 10th step, was to be vigilant to see how these traits would pop up in my experience. And then with the awareness that I was engaged in one of these repetitive patterns, such as putting others first to my own detriment, I could catch myself in the act and change course. It took a while to do that, and I still struggle with that because these traits are, deeply ingrained. But, awareness is the greatest agent of change. And so it really helped me understand and accept that my personality had these characteristics, that I could relate to them in a different way and become more effective. And so that was, and the other thing too was in ACA, we really emphasized having this compassionate, loving relationship with yourself. And one of my core features in ACA was just the opposite, a hostile, punitive, demanding, almost truculent nature towards myself. So that, with the help of my higher power, gave me the ability to have compassion for my shortcomings and communicate with myself in a more loving and compassionate way. And that made the difference. And so that's what I got out of
Yeah,
ACA.
beautiful. Because I think many people in other 12-step programs suffer some of those same traits and experiences and aren't getting them resolved. And it's very important that we go back oftentimes to our childhood and repair some of the damage that was done there. So good for you. Another thing I wanted to compliment you on is most psychologists get it trained out of them to doing any self-revelation. You've done a very nice job of telling people where you are, and that's really unusual and appreciated.
It's interesting. When I was just a little Bruce and taking my I took as a freshman in college, I came up this wonderful book by Sidney Gerard, psychologist, about the art of self-disclosure. And he talked about how what a powerful and necessary thing it was is to be self-revealing. And in my clinical training, I got a lot of flack for being self-revealing because therapists aren't supposed to do that. But I find in my work that we're in this together. We're suffering
Right.
from universal things, and I think
Yes.
that is just sets up a better climate for healing.
Yeah, good for you. I couldn't agree with you. Couldn't agree more. If you guys have followed the series, you know that we've kind of settled into a nice pattern for each episode. I asked Dr. Bruce to send me a number of quotes from Eckhart Tolle on the subject that we're discussing, and then I asked him to comment a little more deeply on each one of them. Makes my job a lot easier, and for that I thank you, Dr. Bruce. So let's go ahead and we'll get started. And Eckhart starts us off with this. Unless and until you access the frequency of presence, all relationships, and particularly intimate relationships, are deeply flawed and dysfunctional. Help us with that one, Dr. Bruce.
For me, what this means is presence is being able to be with someone in a way where you're not thinking and kind of distorting your perceptions of them by having a lot of mind stuff and commentary running through your mind. So when you're present, you really open to see the person as they really are rather than how you're evaluating them. The mind naturally wants to evaluate, but when you're practicing presence, which is practicing the awareness of experience without thought, what appears is more the simplicity and kind of like the virgin manifestation of who the other person is. People in relationships get in a lot of dysfunction when they start having stories about the other, evaluations of the other, you're just this way, and they begin to see each other kind of in a mental, emotional filter that a lot of times obscures kind of the essence of who the other person is. So unless you can just be there as an open field of loving attention without a lot of mental, emotional overlay, what's coming from the other person, unless you have that freshness, that kind of virgin perception of the other, a lot of that emotional judgment stuff is going to come in and create distance where it doesn't have to be there. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so it's a difficult gig to have to be awake. Eckhart Tolle says that whenever you're around someone, especially someone you have a lot of history with, your task is to really practice the presence of God, practice the presence of being present, paying attention to your body so that you're not contaminating the relationship with a lot of perceptions, thoughts, opinions, judgments. I was thinking the other day of like, when I was studying playwriting years ago at Southern Methodist University, they invited Ingmar Bergman, the great Swedish filmmaker, over there. And I was one of the people chosen to sit in on one of the classes he was going to teach about the artistic process. And he was I was just blown away by his presence. He was a great role model for this, what I would call innocent perception. And it really came through because Eckhart says what love is this flow of attention, uncontaminated by thought, emotion, expectation, judgment. When you have a lot of history with a person, all of this involuntary stuff comes on. She's just talking about this, or she means that. And it kind of gets in the way of just apprehending or perceiving the person in the simplicity of the way they're being.
So it's the voice in the head, constant judgment, not being with that person, really.
And the other thing too is the judgment is there's always the link between feeling and thought. And that's why so much of the work being present is to find a portal of the now by taking your attention into the body or the breath, so that there's a severing of this connection between feeling and perception. The other thing that's really important is the emotion is what wrecks relationship, mismanaged emotion, okay? Because with emotion comes an action tendency. And so if you're not alert, let's say your partner says or doesn't do something that triggers in you, first there's an evaluation. Oh, she shouldn't say that, or that's hurtful. Then the body quickly reacts, usually with some type of discomfort and pain. And then part of emotion is an action tendency. What comes with every emotion is a quick action tendency to say something, do something, move away, speak. And so when you're accessing the frequency of presence, you're able to, and I think they have something like 1/100th of a second between the emotion hits the brain and the ability to act on it or speak out of that emotion. If you have the frequency of presence, you can really intercept and stop the action tendency of the emotion. So if your partner says something that makes you angry, if you're present, you can intercept the action tendency of the emotion. And that is very critical, because if people when couples are able to not speak out of the hurt feeling and the anger, that prevents a lot of damage from occurring. So when you're access the frequency of presence, you're able to prevent the emotion from taking over your behavior and speech. And that is everything. Because once we start wounding, the biggest thing in relationships, the highest correlation that ruins a relationship is what they call negative affect reciprocity. One person gets angry and the other person gets angry back. When there's this negative affect reciprocity, one person being angry and crappy and irritable and the other one back, that creates a lot of damage, destroys the safe union, and it's difficult to repair. So the frequency of presence can intercept a lot of that. Hurt and anger and aggression, they go together. So, but if you're alert and you can recognize, oh my God, my body's surging with this urge to stand up or argue, and you can quiet that urge, then you're able to create and sustain a much safer relationship.
Oftentimes, one reverts back to childhood stuckness also, doesn't it? It's like I feel a wound from the past that's reignited now. And rather than be present, I'm back there.
Yeah. And so the way I look at developmental psychology, I think all the past, it lives in the present. And Tolle says that until you actually sit with the energy of your conditioning, that of those feelings, and sit with it and feel it from within, it keeps recurring. So in the next episode, we talk about emotion sobriety. That's the practice to deal with that past emotional pain as it comes up, to transmute it and dissolve it so that when it comes up, it's not as intense.
This is where perhaps inner child work it could be very helpful, though. That you're providing the nurturing to the kid, rather than expecting the other person to be aware that at the moment you're 6 years old,
Yeah.
and
I
be very
don't
sensitive to that.
Personally, I don't like saying you're being 6 years old. Look, our brain stores emotional memories based on previous experience.
Uh-huh.
Most of the patterns are laid down, they say, before the ages of 7 in interpersonal interaction. I don't like to think about you're being a kid. What's happened is you've had experience, and those patterns still live on in you as
Yes.
habitual ways of being. And I much rather to look at it rather than saying you're a kid, just that you're in a vulnerable state where there's fear and hurt that you've experienced before, but it's now present. Um, but the inner child work where you talk, can personify that hurt as a child and you love it is very, very useful.
Yeah.
But I look at it more as like, wow, things happened, created patterns in me of hurt and fear and anger and stuff, and they reappear.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway,
Yeah.
and they will come out. I mean, everyone is a victim of their conditioning. And
Yeah.
again, with the frequency of presence, um, you can be aware of it. And the other thing too, and I made this mistake before because I like to think and analyze everything, and there's a place for that, for understanding. But a lot of these people who talk about transforming past trauma into peace and a different way of being focus on feeling the feeling in the body, not so much with thinking about it. And so in my own relationships and with couples, I encourage couples when you're interacting with people with your partner, be on the alert for a sudden surge of emotion in your body.
Mm.
And because you'll sense if someone is rejecting you or saying something critical, the body will respond very quickly and the heart rate will go up, the attention in the jaws, perhaps. So feel that feeling and not turn it into thinking as much. And that gives you a better idea to calm yourself, soothe yourself so that emotion doesn't take you over and make you act like a jerk.
So looking at relationships, oftentimes they start off on a high, but over time they can quickly sour. So a couple of passages here from Eckhart. They may seem perfect for a while, such as when you are in love, but invariably that apparent perfection gets disrupted as arguments, conflicts, dissatisfaction, and emotional or even physical violence occur with increasing frequency. Love can turn into savage attack, feelings of hostility, to complete withdrawal of affection at the flick of a switch. And this is considered normal. It's scary, but it's true, huh? Tell us about that.
Well, it's really true. And so the uh, the romance phase of a relationship is the person satisfying your needs, and there's a lot of joy. There's euphoria. Someone sees me. Someone understands me. There's this affection. There's this sexual chemistry. It's all pleasure. But eventually, the part reaches a point where relationship will reach a point where the partner starts behaving in ways that uh, don't feel good and usually activate what they call the attachment alarm system. When someone behaves in ways that uh, we see as unloving or aren't meeting our nets, the attachment alarm system sends out a signal that, wow, this is very threatening. It hurts. And from that feeling of threat, people can get very aggressive or very cold. And that's what happens. So I always tell people you don't know what you have in a relationship until you've had that first emotionally charged sense of disappointment and conflict, because then you know who you're dealing with there. Does that person have the resources to restrain their emotions, understand their emotions, communicate about their emotions, soothe their emotions? And then you can readjust and go from that romantic phase to more of a realistic, more sagacious type of bond. But yeah, so the minute someone sends a signal to our brain that we perceive as threatening, becomes very difficult because we get angry or cold. And then all the thought stuff comes in where you start judging the person and making the other person wrong. And then you're really on a slippery slope.
I didn't know how to argue uh, when my wife and I started our relationship many years ago. Uh, when the conflict stuff first came up, my first response is run. I'm out of here. I'm out of here. And she sat me down and said, "No, you have to stay." Well,
Yeah,
that was a new pattern, to stay and face and feel and not escape.
yeah. Well, so what happens is in attachment wounds, we have basically two ways of coping with that. Run, which is flee,
Yeah,
or pursue your partner kind of aggressively. And
right.
so those are the two kind of maladaptive attachment reactions to feeling threatened or feeling disappointed in your partner.
Hmm.
Uh, People who have good relationship histories, what they call secure attachment, who had people early on who can say, all right, I know you're upset. Let's calm down. Let's talk about this, are more able to stay in the game and have a nice balance between withdrawal and pursuing. And again, establishing a safe, calm, peaceful interpersonal climate is the name of the game. And anything that threatens that or destroys that is really bad, very difficult for us. So knowing what your attachment strategy is when conflict comes up, people will either run away, withdraw, withhold, and so others will pursue, start nagging, what's wrong with you, start complaining about the other person. And both of those tend to be ineffective. So how to handle that conflict, of course, in all the literature is key to having a successful relationship.
And again, this is where the watchfulness is so important,
Yeah,
and to catch it upstream before it develops into a torrent.
it is. It's all about watchfulness, being aware of what's going on. So why? So you can manage it, soothe it,
Yeah.
and transmute it into something else. Because the natural tendency is going to be human beings get aggressive when they're hurt. It's just what humans do. They get aggressive or they check out. That's what they want to do, the flight or flight.
Hmm.
So managing those responses are absolutely necessary. And unless you're awake and present, so you could catch yourself in the act. Here I am, I'm hurt, but I'm clamming up, I'm not talking, I'm staying away. If you can't catch yourself in the act of doing that, then you're just going to keep repeating it. And then your partner's going to evaluate that in a way that doesn't make them feel good. And it's just going to intensify the disconnection.
Yeah, the next quote may bring us to more the heart of the problem. He says, relationships do not cause pain and unhappiness. They bring out the pain and unhappiness that is already in you. We use relationships or somebody to cover up our pain.
That's so true. I mean, it's true. Now, if we were in a state where we had, like the promises forecast for us, we have an unshakable peace within, we have a new freedom and a new happiness. We're rooted in the peace of God. If you have that, my God, you're going to be a very invulnerable to a lot of the emotional triggers that happen in intimate relationship.
Or you're going to find out that you don't have that.
Well, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so what happens is, and Toll has a quote, he says, if you can't be peaceful and happy and at ease when you're by yourself, you're sure as hell not going to be able to feel that in the fire of human relationships. And
Yeah.
that's true. What happens, I think, is that we fall in love, we have the euphoria. I'm happy, I'm great, I'm happy, I'm bursting with love, and then the partner disappoints us in some way, the pain comes back. And rather than owning the fact that our level of development is such that we're not inwardly peaceful and unconditionally loving, we hold the other person accountable and basically want to blame them for our own unhappiness. And we have a story about them and how they did this and how they, and rather than taking responsibility that I myself have not been able to access this peace, this unconditional love, the serenity within. And that's why they talk about relationship, not as an end in itself, but as a means to developing this intimate contact with our higher power, the presence of God, the peace of God. And so it's a tough gig, because when we're around loved ones, we want to take it easy. We don't want to work so hard. We'd like to relax. But here what the spiritual teaching is, no, when you're around your partner, you need to be alert and awake and watchful. And I know couples who reach a point where they both become present enough so that there is more of an ease and a more of a co-created serenity. But we're never invulnerable, because, again, our brains respond very quickly to any sign that the partner is abandoning, threatening, rejecting, criticizing us. And there's been a lot of research that it's facial expressions and tone of voice that trigger emotional reactions more than words or behavior. Just so if your partner just kind of like looks away when you're saying something's serious, your brain is going to pick up on that, feel threatened by it. And so unless you're awake and again, watch that body's reaction. One of my favorite books is Your Body Doesn't Lie. So I always encourage couples, and in my own practice, watch that body. You'll feel some sensation. You'll feel the quickened heartbeat. You'll feel the frown in the face. You'll feel the tensed jaw. Feel that body. And that's Tolle's thing for emotional work, is feel that body from within, especially when you're around other people. And again, the reason we do that is, again, because if the emotion takes us over, which means it's going to control what we say, how we say it, what we do, then we're really just, you're going to screw up your relationships, because you're acting out of aggression, hurt, and fear, and that's never effective.
The set of quotes begin moving us now towards the solution. And Eckhart writes, "For love to flourish, the light of your presence needs to be strong enough so that you no longer get taken over by the thinker or emotional pain body and mistake them for who you are."
That's it. That's what I was just talking about. Now, and I've noticed it in myself and my relationships, we have to have some humility in this. There aren't too many masters at this stuff. So we're all little students in training, trying to learn day by day, episode by episode, emotion by emotion. But we have to have the aim of trying to be awake when these occur. But when that emotion gets intense, again, you're going to want to defend. You're going to want to attack. You're going to want to just aggress, or go cold and distance, withdraw or attack. And if this takes you over, you're basically out of control. We're talking about involuntary compulsive thinking and speaking and doing. It's very automatic. It's very lower centers. It's very animalistic, and it's instinctual, and it's primitive, and it's aggression, so it gets into attack and defend. And it's a form of violence usually.
Yeah.
So
and we're all capable of it.
So we all have emotional pain bodies, which means that we have past pain in us. Our partner says things that triggers some old pain in us. For example, with me, one of mine is feeling really bad about myself. Okay, so my partner could say something that could trigger that shame energy where I'm like that. If I'm not alert, I can quickly, easily get into like attacking her for making me feel this way rather than sit with the feeling itself.
Hmm.
And then that's a much more skillful way of dealing with it. Um,
So what he's saying is it's very important that we know who we are. This that we have a good solid sense of self.
exactly. When I work with couples, I talk about raw spots. Couples who have really good relationships know what types of things are going to make their partner sad or happy or ashamed. That's going to cause them to suffer. It's
Hmm.
just like with my dog. If I rub her on the belly near her left leg, she's going to bite. For some reason, she doesn't like it. That's a raw spot with her, and we're like that too. We have raw spots. When someone rubs that raw spot, we're going to dysregulate, feel some painful emotion, either withdraw or attack. And so knowing ourselves and knowing your partner is understanding what their vulnerabilities are, so you can be very careful not to aggravate that. And so that is a wonderful way of loving someone, understanding their vulnerabilities, being mindful enough so that you don't say and do things that trigger that past pain in the person. And that's a wonderful way of being. And yet at the same time, unless you're aware of these raw spots yourself and can communicate them to your partner, you're not going to have a good chance of having that mutual understanding of each other's vulnerabilities. Now,
Mm.
Tolle would say that you're not really responsible for the other person's vulnerabilities. I disagree with that. I think that in intimacy, it really does help to know what your own vulnerabilities are, what's going to make you feel shame, what's going to make you feel unhappy, what's going to make you feel angry, what's going to make you feel unloved. Having that awareness is really good because then you can be more skillful when you're with your partner. So much about
Yeah.
love, I think, is about gentleness.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that a certain behavior or a certain look or a certain way of expressing yourself is going to cause your partner a lot of suffering, you're really in bad shape because you're unwittingly causing your partner to suffer. And a lot of people, especially men, have difficulty in expressing that vulnerability when it occurs. So, yeah.
An interesting thing. So I'm getting sober. This is 50 years ago or so, and I'm with my wife. This is before we're even married. She's in Al-Anon, but she tells me she does not drink, and I really appreciate that. And I kind of bring this up because I know a lot of people who are in recovery say, well, whether my wife or husband drinks or not doesn't have a damn thing to do with me. It's up to me. It's my thing. Well, I got to tell you, I really appreciated that that's how she comes about it. And she said, well, there's something a little bit hostile, in drinking when I'm living with an alcoholic, you know? I can't tell you how much I appreciated that. And had she not, and you chalk this up to my own weakness, I don't know that I'd have 50 years sober today.
Mm.
I don't know it. I mean, it's kind of like living with a smoker. I get there are such things as social smokers. They're damn few and far between, but there are some people who are like that. You know, but if you're married to someone with lung cancer, you know, are you going to be smoking? I don't know. Might get some correspondence on that, but it's just my experience,
Yeah.
and maybe it fits in with what you're saying to be sensitive to the other person in the relationship.
Yeah. Compassion is so much a part, I think, of successful intimate relationship. If you're not aware of the suffering that you're going through and the suffering that the relationship is causing your partner, uh, intimacy tends to, I think, become degraded.
Mm.
And so being awake and being able to see and witness, wow, that really hurt me. Sometimes I work with couples and I'll see one spouse saying something that you could tell is just crushing the soul of the other, and the person be totally unaware that this person is reacting with an intense degree of pain, and they don't even see it. It doesn't even register. And that is, people love to be connected with someone who can see them and feel what they're feeling. Feeling felt is the coin of the realm, I think, in intimate relationship. Oh, honey, you're sad. I feel your sadness. And you can come in and show a caring response. A lot of people aren't really good at what they call connective emotions, caring emotions, nurturing emotions, because it really requires putting the focus on the other rather than oneself. And that's very problematic for relationships because we're all going to suffer. We're all going to suffer in relationships, intentionally, unintentionally, at the hands of our beloved. And so, unless we can be awake enough to notice, oh my God, honey, what I said hurt your feelings. I didn't mean that. Anything I can do to make you feel better, I'm here for you. Some message like that. We
Mm.
need to feel that. What is love? It's connection. It's a feeling of interconnected. I think one of the most important things in a relationship is sending messages of validation. I see what you're feeling. I feel what you're feeling. It makes sense to me what you're feeling, and I care about what you're experiencing. And Eckhart would say
This
that,
is the therapeutic technique of kind of feeding back in a positive way. I hear you saying,
yeah,
that the person gets heard
yeah.
where they
It,
are.
it's not a technique, it's a way of loving. It's, it could be, I teach a lot of relationship skills. I'm kind of a skill-based therapist. Learning, how to do that is important, but really feeling it
Yeah.
is the most important thing.
Hmm.
And again,
But
that's why,
even fake it till you make it
yeah,
in the beginning is okay.
yeah, yeah.
It'd be
Um,
appreciated.
yeah, you could say, I'm sorry, I hurt you, and that have mean nothing. Or you can say that and it means everything.
In this next quote, I hear Eckhart telling us relationships are important, but maybe not for the purpose the ego thinks. He says, for presence to become deeply rooted, it must be tested in the fire of relationship.
His vision is, relationships aren't here to make you happy. They're here to
Mm.
make you enlightened. They're here to teach you that you need more than anything else in relationships, contact with your higher power to
Yeah.
make this worse. And that you do all this presence practice in relationships to develop and deepen your awareness of your contact with this loving presence, which we call our higher power. And to be deeply or more deeply rooted in that conscious contact, is what he would say the inner purpose of relationship. And how wonderful, I'm still a romantic, so I have difficulty because I want so much from the other, but experience bears it out. It has to come within. Love is a state of being that's within ourselves. It can't come from without. And as much as we need other people to nurture us and see us and validate us, at the end of the day, the kingdom of heaven is within, and we have to
Mm.
exit ourselves. And when you have two people in a relationship who are doing that with humility and purpose, um, you really can have what I call a heavenly marriage, a spiritual marriage, because the transcendent, the non-personal self stuff, starts becoming the dominant aspect of energy in the relationship rather
Yeah,
than
but it's the heaven in me and the heaven in her that are going to meet. And if it is, you need to give me heaven,
excellent.
and if you don't, you're
Yeah,
going to experience hell.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And it becomes, that was one of my core features in my development thing. I was never a sex addict. I never found sex without love. I found it repulsive personally, but I was a love addict. I mean, I just really bought the thing that, I would find my Beatrice and she would be my salvation. And I projected all my gold shadow onto the feminine, and it didn't work. But it was very alluring. And so to find that, yes, each of us has to find that great reality, or that peace, or at least be on the way to moving into that interior castle. All bets are off. There are what they call apparent marriages, where people are apparently, they're civil, they're moral, they're good. But to have a spiritual marriage, you really have to have that what I call the transcendent, the divine coming in. And also true, while it's also true that we're miniature, there's a miniature society of heaven in us waiting to be reborn. There's also a lot of little miniature hells in each and one of us.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of selfishness, a lot of pride, and stuff like that. So I'm a big guy on humility and compassion as being kind of necessary ground of having a good relationship. I'm humble and vulnerable and flawed. You're humble, you're vulnerable, you're flawed. Compassion for each other, compassion for this thing, and yet we aim high to bring this presence of God in. That's why the prayer couples who pray and meditate together in earnest really have a leg up on this thing. It's not necessary, but research does show that couples who do pray and meditate together have a lot more successful, deep relationships. There's actually a therapy that I really like, acceptance and commitment therapy, which is based upon mindfulness practices for both couples. It's very helpful because it activates that compassion, that acceptance, taking responsibility for your own pain, etc.
That leads us beautifully into the next quote, and this one could come straight out of the big book, eh? Dr. Paul, acceptance is the key to all our problems. Eckhart says it's the key to our relationship problems as well. He writes this: the greatest catalyst for change in a relationship is complete acceptance of your partner as he or she is, without needing to judge or change them in any way. Then he goes on to say, listening is the greatest thing you can do for your partner. Listening gives the other space to be.
With couples, I say to them, imagine your spouse is a breed of dog. Okay. And I love reading about different breeds of dog. So you have a breed of dog that needs a lot of exercise, likes a lot of affection, likes to be covered in dark when it sleeps, can get very aggressive at times. And so accepting the way a person's naturally is rather than wanting to change it. Why can't you be more lighthearted when you're married to someone who has a temperament that's kind of melancholy? That doesn't work.
I
Because
wanted a basset hound, but I married an Afghan.
Right, exactly. And then you
Okay.
said you're hating the other person or complaining
Yeah.
that, you're a basset hound, so, so, yeah, but the acceptance I think he's talking about is if you're really present and you're allowing the other to be, kind of perceptually and experientially, we react very, I think, subconsciously to how people are communicating or just being with us. And when you're just sitting there and allowing the person to be, it really allows that other person to relax and feel safety. And all the relationship literature says that the thing that's most needed in a relationship is this profound sense that it's safe to be with this person. It's safe to be with the person. I can be just as I am, and it's safe. It's safe. And
And
so,
she's becoming, and I'm becoming.
right.
You don't have to be, but on the way to.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
love the term loving acceptance, a loving acceptance. Um, I like Charles Dickens because in his characters, he's not known as a great character writer, but I love his character because all of his characters um, have, in one scene, they'll be showing real monstrous, horrible traits of personality or character. And then a few chapters later, the same person will be in a situation where the person is just behaving with just kindness and all these wonderful qualities. And I think that's true for most of us. We're a mixed bag. We have, under certain circumstances, we could be very selfish, ruthless, aggressive, whatever. And on the other hand, we all have a center of good. And when you do acceptance, you can be less shocked by the fact that people are multifaceted, that they can go down the scale of development at times, and their shadow stuff could grab them at times. And you can accept that and allow them to be, and still continue with that loving acceptance of the totality of the person. So a lot of times we will demand perfection and a lot of uh, almost superhuman ways of being from our partner. And so
Mm-hmm.
acceptance, I think, gets back to that thing of humility, knowing that I have flaws, my wife has flaws, we have flaws, we're suffering from them. Together, we're working on bringing the presence of God into our relationship to accept, transform, and change what we can. Um, and the serenity prayer is very apropos for marriages: accept the things you cannot change and change the things you can. In older couples who have that sweet, positive bond, it's very beautiful to see. Uh, he's just an ornery old Gus, and that's just the way he is. And there's no contempt. It's just kind of a lovingly, oh, there he is. And there's a way of loving, you can lovingly accept the limitations of another person rather than make it like a story of deprivation or attack on the other person's character. Um,
And
so,
and there's also a skill to do that with yourself.
yes,
Yeah, when you see
yes.
that coming up, to forgive yourself, to be patient with yourself.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It is. And Eckhart says in one passage, he says, when you reach the point where you notice stuff in yourself and you can just smile at it
Yeah.
rather than make a big drama about it,
Uh-huh.
you're on your way. There I am being a blah, blah, blah.
Right. Yeah, that's good.
And again, it's about this notion of not having these things take you over and determine how you
Mm.
treat yourself and how you treat others.
Let me do the final quote because it's a beauty. If you continue to pursue the goal of salvation through a relationship, you will be disillusioned again and again. But if you accept that the relationship is here to make you conscious instead of happy, then the relationship will offer you salvation, and you will be aligning yourself with the higher consciousness that wants to be born into this world.
There it is. Boom.
Yeah, meditate on that one, guys. We're going to
Yeah,
the put all of these quotes in the show notes, but really pay attention to that one. It's beautiful and it's pretty deep.
well, you look at the ego, the separated self, non-enlightened self, beyond spiritual self, is, an idolater. It seeks salvation in things outside itself, which will not activate the full development of our human capabilities to be spiritual, loving, kind, awake, and all that stuff. So seeking the goal of salvation through success, through relationship, through fame, through accomplishment, through recognition. They're all things that ultimately aren't going to satisfy. They could satisfy the ego to some extent, but the ego is it's a
Very
bottomless
fickle,
pit,
very
and
fickle.
it's always going to be. It's always insecure at some level because it knows it's a false sense of security.
Right.
Um, but it goes again to, and it's difficult. It's difficult for me to not seek salvation through a relationship because, it's the need for it to be loved and seen and validated and comfort and be looked at with positive attention. Those are legitimate needs, and humans need them. Mammals need them. Yet at the same time, they're not going to get us into that interior castle where we really feel the presence of God, the presence of our higher power, that unshakable peace within. And it's kind of well, I don't want to make it sound like a sad state of affairs. It's just the way it is.
The mystics, when I study the mystics and their writings and their favorite scriptures, they're really Song of Songs.
Mhm.
It's the intimacy.
Yeah,
It's the intimacy of that relationship with God that is maybe the only thing that really satisfies the soul.
absolutely. And, I'm not there yet, but I know that um, to feel like some people have experienced this intimate, all embracing love uh, in connection with the divine, coming forth from the divine, is that's the true all. That's the true all. And then what comes through that, I think, it's interesting in the commandment. First, you seek, love your God with all your heart, then love your neighbor. I think there's some wisdom in that once we're able to, throughout our spiritual work, to feel that love of the divine, then what can come through that is just a higher loving vibrational frequency towards others, which is unconditional, because that's what the divine love is, unconditional. So that's the way it works. And so what do we do with the relationships? They're going to teach us suffering. They're going to teach us the necessity of transforming that suffering through contact with the transcendent, using that compassionate presence and love and wisdom to soothe our own suffering so that we really can allow that divine love to flow out into our relationships, humbly, of course.
When when I wanted to run in the early days of my relationship with my wife, uh, a sponsor said some very helpful words to me. He said, "Bill, you may as well work it out with her
Mm,
because you're just going to have to work it out with the next one, and you're already halfway down the road."
it's true. It's
It
true.
was true.
The same stuff's going to keep coming up with a
Keep
different set of
coming
parents.
up.
And
Keeps coming up until you go through it.
yeah.
Go through it. Yeah. Well, Dr. Bruce, this has been wonderful once again. And so, where are we going to go next time? What's the next episode is on?
Well, a lot of people in fellowship talk about they're struggling with emotional sobriety.
Mm,
Uh, and what I think the most difficult teaching he talks about is the notion of the emotional pain body, how past emotional pain lives in us. And unless we bring the power of now to bear on that past emotional pain as it pops up, especially in relationships, uh, if we can't sit with it in a specific way, be present to it, it's going to keep returning and returning again, perhaps even with more intensity. So, how to dissolve the past emotional pain in the present is the topic.
wonderful. I'll look forward to it. Well, thank you, Bruce, for once again for sharing with us. It was great, and I thank you guys for listening. I hope it was really helpful, and if it was, turn on some of your friends to these podcasts or YouTube channel, and help us carry the message out there. I try to get guests who really have something to say to those of us who are in recovery and needing to grow along spiritual lines that we can go a little deeper with this thing. So thank you, Dr. Bruce. Thank you guys for listening, and keep coming back.
Thank you, Father Bill. Thank you. Bye.